Welcome to another deep dive. You know, I love to get into the details and learn something new, and today we're going to be diving deep into something that you probably have used before, and you probably have laying around your house.
I know what you're talking about.
That's right. We're talking about colored pencils.
Ooh.
Our source material for this dark dive is an article titled The Impact of Colored Pencils on Children's Artistic Growth and Creativity. And I think even though this article focuses specifically on children, I think what we talk about today is really going to resonate with adults.
Absolutely. I'm sure we're going to find a lot of points in common between using colored pencils as a child and how that translates into adulthood.
Yeah, and even revisiting that. Like for me, I was thinking, it's been a long time since I actually sat down and colored something. I'm sure you have colored more recently than me, but as an adult,
Well, I have a 5-year-old.
that's right. Yeah, you're in it right now.
Yeah, that's my excuse to still color. I get to color all the time.
There you go. Well, let's jump into the article here. The author kicks it off by listing 9 benefits of coloring with colored pencils.
Hmm.
I'm going to highlight just a few that really jumped out to me. The first one was teaching basic concepts. It seems simple enough, but think about it. You're learning colors, shapes, numbers even. You start to understand spatial reasoning, things like inside and outside, above and below. Like I was saying, it sounds super basic, but that's a really important foundation for learning in general.
Yeah, it's amazing how something as simple as coloring can introduce these fundamental concepts in such an engaging way.
Right, it's learning through play, which is really the best way to learn, especially for kids.
Agreed. And you know what else? It really helps develop fine motor skills. That precise control needed to stay within the lines or color a specific area really strengthens those hand muscles, which of course is going to benefit them later on with things like writing.
That's such a great point. I remember as a kid just loving to sharpen the colored pencils over and over. I don't know, there was something about that.
Yeah, that was always the best part.
But that's developing fine motor skills, right?
Totally.
Everything. And then another benefit that I wanted to highlight is the idea of preparing for future artistic endeavors.
Okay.
So colored pencils kind of act as a bridge between those early scribbles and more advanced art forms.
Yeah, I see it as a stepping stone. You're learning about color mixing, you're experimenting with different pressures and techniques, you're starting to develop that hand-eye coordination, which are all essential skills for any type of art.
Right. It's like laying the groundwork for a lifelong love of creativity. And even if you don't become a professional artist, which, let's face it, most of us don't, those early experiences with colored pencils can still have a lasting impact on your creativity and your appreciation for art.
Absolutely, it nurtures that creative spirit from a young age.
So we've got all these great benefits, but I want to dive a little deeper into some of the more unexpected ones that the article mentions. One that stood out to me was the idea that coloring can actually foster environmental awareness. Did that one jump out at you too?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
At first glance, you might not think of coloring as an environmentally friendly activity, but you're right, there's a connection there.
Right, like how can just using colored pencils on paper be tied to environmental awareness?
Well, think about it. When a child colors a picture of a tree, a flower, an animal, they're engaging with nature. They're observing the details, the colors, the textures. It's almost like a mini lesson in mindfulness, but with an added layer of appreciating the natural world.
I love that perspective. So it's not just about filling in the spaces, it's about noticing the intricacies of nature that we might otherwise overlook.
Exactly. And that awareness can spark curiosity. It can lead to questions like, why is the sky blue? Why do leaves change color in the fall? And it opens up a whole world of exploration and appreciation for the environment.
That's a great point. And that kind of awareness, that curiosity, is the seed of environmentalism. You know what I mean?
I do. It's like planting a seed that hopefully grows into a lifelong love and respect for nature.
Right. And it's not just about grand landscapes and, saving the rainforest or anything. It could be as simple as appreciating the beauty of a single flower or a blade of grass.
Absolutely. And that connection to nature, even on a small scale, can have a profound impact on a child's well-being and development.
That's beautifully said. Okay, so we've got environmental awareness. Another benefit the article mentions is emotional expression.
Ooh.
The idea that people, especially children, who might struggle to put their feelings into words, can use coloring as a visual language for their emotions. I was wondering what your take is on that, the idea of colored pencils as a visual language.
Well, colors have such a powerful impact on our emotions, don't they? Think about it. We associate certain colors with certain feelings. Like
Yeah.
blue is often associated with calmness and peace, Red is associated with passion and anger. Green is often associated with growth and nature.
Mm.
So it makes sense that children might intuitively choose colors that reflect what they're feeling inside.
I love that. It's like giving emotions a tangible form.
Yeah.
And sometimes just the act of putting those colors on paper, regardless of the subject matter, can be therapeutic, a way to process those feelings without having to find the words.
Definitely. It's like a nonverbal form of communication, a way to release those pent-up emotions and make sense of them through color.
Mm.
And, even as adults, we often find ourselves drawn to certain colors when we're feeling a certain way, right?
Absolutely. I know for me, when I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed, I tend to gravitate towards blues and greens, which are very calming colors.
Me too.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating how colors can have such a universal impact on our mood and emotions.
It's a whole other deep dive we could get into.
Right.
The psychology of color. Okay, but sticking with the article here, we've talked about environmental awareness, emotional expression, and I want to touch on one more unexpected benefit. The author talks about coloring and the development of a sense of time and succession, and I'll admit that one left me scratching my head a little bit.
Yeah, I can see why that might seem a little abstract at first, but I think it's really about the process of creating something over time.
Okay.
When a child is coloring, they start with a blank page, right? And gradually they add layers of color, they add details, they build upon what they've already done. It's a step-by-step process that unfolds over time, and each choice they make influences the next. So in a way, they're creating a visual timeline of their own actions.
Hmm. I see. So it's about recognizing that things happen in a sequence, that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to the process. And they can actually see that progression in their artwork.
Precisely. And that visual representation can be incredibly helpful in grasping the concept of time as a linear sequence,
Mm.
not just for children, but for adults as well. Think about planning a project, or understanding historical events, or even just following a recipe. It's all about understanding that things happen in a specific order and that there's a logical flow to the process.
Okay, so colored pencils aren't just a fun way to pass the time. They're also a tool for developing those cognitive skills, emotional intelligence, and even, as we talked about, environmental awareness. It's really making me reconsider the potential of these seemingly simple tools.
It's amazing what we take for granted sometimes, isn't it?
It is. We just touched on some really basic benefits. There's still so much more to explore in this article.
Yeah, we haven't even scratched the surface yet.
We're going to dive into how colored pencils can actually stimulate creativity in a bunch of different ways. But first, we're going to take a quick break. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. I always love a good deep dive.
Me too. And we're right in the middle of a really fascinating one here. Right before the break, we were talking about all the amazing benefits of using colored pencils. But it's not just about grabbing any old set of colored pencils and going to town. The article actually delves into some specific characteristics that are ideal for children.
Right. They emphasize things like non-toxic materials, washable pigments, a wide range of colors, and the ability to blend colors easily. Making sure that the tools themselves are safe and easy for kids to use.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's interesting because even though those are geared towards children, those qualities can definitely apply to adults as well.
Absolutely. I mean, who doesn't love a good of blendable colored pencils?
Right. Okay. So the article then moves on to discuss 4 ways that colored pencils specifically can stimulate creativity in children.
Okay.
The first one is pretty straightforward. It's encouraging free drawing and coloring. So basically just letting kids explore and experiment without any rules or restrictions.
Yeah, just letting that creativity flow naturally.
Exactly. No pressure to create a masterpiece. Just pure, unadulterated self-expression.
I love that. And I think that's something that we as adults can sometimes forget about.
Absolutely. We get so caught up in the end result, that we forget about the joy of the process.
Yeah, the freedom to experiment, to make mistakes, to just have fun.
Right. Okay. So the second way to stimulate creativity that the article mentions is providing a variety of themes and subjects. So instead of just giving kids a blank page, you give them prompts or themes to work with. Things like draw your favorite animal, or draw a picture of your family, or draw what you think the moon looks like up close, stuff like
Yeah,
that.
that's a great way to spark their imagination and encourage them to think outside the box.
Exactly. It's like giving them a starting point, but then letting them run wild with it. And again, I think this is something that adults can benefit from too. Sometimes having a little bit of structure or a theme to work with can actually be really liberating creatively.
Absolutely. It can help to focus that creative energy and give you a direction to explore.
Okay. Number 3 on the list is engaging in group coloring activities.
Ooh, like that one.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's about encouraging collaboration and shared creativity. So instead of coloring alone, kids can work together on a mural or a group project, or even just color side by side and share their ideas and inspiration.
It's a great way to build social skills and learn from each other. And, it can also be a lot of fun to see how different people interpret the same theme or subject.
Right. Everyone brings their own unique perspective and style to the table.
Exactly. And those differences are what make it so interesting and inspiring.
Okay. And then the final way to stimulate creativity that the article mentions is reading stories and letting kids draw pictures based on what they read.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's about connecting visual art with storytelling and imagination. So kids can listen to a story or read a book and then create their own illustrations or interpretations of the characters, the setting the plot, whatever captures their imagination.
I love that. It's like a visual retelling of the story from their own unique point of view.
Exactly. And it helps them to develop their visual literacy skills to understand how images can convey meaning and emotion.
It's also a great way to encourage reading comprehension, by asking them to think critically about the story and translate it into a visual form.
I love all of these ideas, and I think they can be adapted for adults as well.
Oh, absolutely. I'm already thinking about how I can incorporate some of these into my own creative practice.
Me too. It's like a reminder that creativity is a lifelong journey and that there are always new ways to explore and express ourselves.
I think that's a great takeaway from this section.
All right, so we've talked about the benefits of using colored pencils. We've discussed some specific ways to stimulate creativity. Now, the article goes on to explore some of the psychological impacts of coloring with colored pencils.
Ooh, this should be interesting.
It is, and some of them are pretty profound. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, but it's still fascinating to see it laid out like this.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, for starters, the author talks about coloring as a way to express emotions without words. We kind of touched on this earlier, but they go into more detail here, explaining how coloring can be a safe and healthy outlet for processing complex emotions, especially for those who might find it difficult to articulate their feelings verbally.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like providing a nonverbal channel for those emotions to flow through.
Exactly. And it can be especially helpful for children who are still developing their language skills, or for adults who are dealing with trauma or difficult experiences that are hard to put into words.
It's like giving them a voice even if it's not a spoken one.
Beautifully said. Okay, another psychological impact that the article highlights is the idea of coloring as a tool for combating loneliness.
Interesting. I wouldn't have immediately connected those two things.
Me neither. But when you think about it, coloring, especially in a group setting, can foster a sense of connection and belonging. It's a shared activity that can bring people together and create a sense of community.
It's like a common ground, something that everyone can participate in and enjoy regardless of their age or background or skill level.
Right. And that sense of shared experience can be really powerful in combating feelings of isolation and loneliness.
It's like creating a social fabric through color. I love that.
Okay, and then one more psychological impact that I wanted to mention is the idea of coloring as a way to foster environmental sensitivity. Again, we kind of touched on this earlier, but the author goes into more detail here, explaining how coloring can help children develop a deeper appreciation for the natural world and a sense of responsibility for protecting it.
Right, because when they're coloring a picture of a tree or a flower or an animal,
Mm.
they're not just seeing it as an abstract image. They're engaging with it on a more personal level. They're noticing the details, the colors, the textures. It's like they're bringing it to life in their own way.
Exactly. And that connection that they're forming with nature through coloring can translate into a desire to protect it, to care for it.
It's like planting a seed of environmental stewardship.
I love that. And it's not just about kids. Adults can benefit from this too. We can all use a little more connection with nature in our lives.
Absolutely. Especially in today's world where we're so disconnected from the natural world.
Okay, so we've talked about the psychological impacts of coloring. And now I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the practical side of things.
Okay.
The article has a whole section on choosing the right colored pencils for children.
Right. Making sure they're age appropriate, safe, and easy to use.
Exactly. But I want to broaden that out a little bit and talk about the wider world of colored pencils, because there's a whole universe of options out there beyond the basic crayon box.
Oh, absolutely. And it can be a little overwhelming, honestly, especially if you're not familiar with all the different types and brands.
Right. So I was hoping you could shed some light on that for us.
I'd be happy to. Where should we start?
Well, let's start with the basics. What are some of the different types of colored pencils that are out there?
Okay, so you've got your standard wax-based colored pencils, which are probably the most common and familiar type. They're great for beginners because they're affordable and easy to use.
Sure.
But then you've also got oil-based colored pencils, which have a richer, more vibrant color payoff. And then there are watercolor pencils, which are kind of a hybrid between colored pencils and watercolors. You can use them dry, like regular colored pencils, but you can also add water to create washes and blends and achieve really unique effects.
Oh, wow. I've always been curious about watercolor pencils.
They're a lot of fun to experiment with.
And then what about different brands? I mean, are there any brands that stand out in terms of quality or performance?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There are some brands that are known for their professional-grade pigments and their smooth blendability. Some of the popular ones that come to mind are Prismacolor, Faber-Castell, Caran d'Ache. These are brands that are beloved by artists of all levels, from beginners to professionals.
I'm writing all this down.
Good, because you're going to want to try all of these out.
Okay, so we've got types, we've got brands, and then what about other considerations when choosing colored pencils? Like, what should people be looking for in terms of quality or characteristics?
Well, a couple of things to keep in mind are light fastness, which refers to how well the colors resist fading over time. And then pigment concentration, which basically means how much color is packed into the pencil. A higher pigment concentration will give you richer, more vibrant colors.
Oh, that's good to know. Because I've definitely had some colored pencils in the past where the colors were just kind of dull and lifeless.
Yeah, those are probably the ones with lower pigment concentration.
Okay. This is all super helpful. So we've covered a lot of ground here today. From the benefits of using colored pencils to specific ways to stimulate creativity to the psychological impacts of coloring to choosing the right tools. I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for this seemingly simple activity.
Me too.
Yeah,
It's amazing how something we often associate with childhood can be so rich and complex.
it really is. But before we get too carried away, we need to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to wrap up this colorful exploration.
Welcome back to the show. Before the break, we were geeking out over all the different types of colored pencils out there.
I'm telling you, there's a whole world of colored pencils to discover out there.
Yeah, it's making me want to raid the art supply store.
But you know what else I was thinking about during the break? We've been talking about all these benefits of coloring and how to stimulate creativity, and it got me thinking about the article's tips for encouraging children to use colored pencils.
I'm sure we can apply a lot of those tips to adults too.
Exactly. Like one of the tips is to create a designated space for art activities.
Oh, I love that. Having a dedicated space where you can spread out your supplies and get messy without worrying about making a mess can be so freeing.
Totally. It's like giving yourself permission to be creative. And I think as adults, we often don't give ourselves that space, both literally and figuratively.
So true. We're always so busy and focused on other things that we forget to make time for our own creative pursuits.
Exactly. And then another tip that the article mentions is to focus on the process rather than the outcome.
Yes. It's all about enjoying the journey, not just the destination.
Right. It's about letting go of the need to create something perfect or impressive and just allowing yourself to play and experiment and see where your creativity takes you.
Because sometimes the most unexpected and beautiful creations come from those moments of just letting go and allowing yourself to be fully present in the process.
I love that. And then one more tip that I wanted to mention is to encourage experimentation and risk-taking.
Oh, that's a good one. Because creativity thrives on trying new things, on pushing those boundaries and stepping outside your comfort zone.
Right. It's about giving yourself permission to make mistakes, to try something new and see what happens.
And to not be afraid to fail, because sometimes those so-called failures lead to the most unexpected breakthroughs.
Okay, so we've talked about all these amazing benefits of using colored pencils. We've explored the different types and brands and characteristics to look for. We've discussed ways to stimulate creativity. We've even delved into the psychological impacts of coloring. And I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
I know, right? It's amazing how something so seemingly simple can be so multifaceted.
But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final thought.
Okay, I'm listening.
Think back to your childhood.
Okay.
What was your favorite thing to color?
What colors did you gravitate towards?
What emotions did you express through those colorful strokes?
And how can you tap into that childlike sense of wonder and creativity in your adult life?
Maybe it's time to dust off those colored pencils and rediscover the joy of creating. Until next time. Keep exploring, keep creating, and keep those colored pencils handy.
See you next time.